Hello viewers, I am here at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and I am doing this recording for the ARPIT in Library and Information Science program coordinated by the Central Library of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. I am G. Mahesh, Senior Principal Scientist at the CSIR National Institute of Science Communication and Information Resources. Today, we will be discussing about altmetrics or alternative metrics. Before we jump into the topic, we shall discuss about a scenario. Now, let us assume that you are working in a large research institute or a large academic institution like say a university, and in the last 3 months, let us say that the faculty and researchers in your institution has published close to 50 odd papers, 50 odd research papers, and the administration in the research institute or in your university wants you to identify the top 10 research papers. How would we go about doing this? Now, when I ask this question elsewhere, the response after some thought comes that the journal impact factor would be identified as one of the criteria, or generally that is pointed out as the criterion for ranking of these research papers as well. So, look at the impact factor of the journals in which these 50 papers were published and then rank them according to the impact factor with the papers in those journals that have high impact factors ranking on the top. Well, is this the right way to rank the research papers, or is there any better way? And what about scholarly communication that happens beyond the journals, the other media? So, these are some of the questions that we shall explore while discussing this topic about altmetrics or alternative metrics. Now, measurement is a word, measurement, evaluation, or even assessment. These are words that scare scientists and researchers to some extent. The moment we say that we are going to evaluate a scientist or evaluate a researcher or measure the performance, it sounds a little scary. But then measuring or assessing research works, evaluating scientists and researchers, evaluating institutional R&D productivity, evaluating research projects, assessing research projects. So, all these are part and parcel of the research and academic landscape, and there have been ways and means of doing this for the last many decades. There have been ways and means of assessing, evaluating, ranking, measuring researchers, their research output, institutions, projects, and so on. These have been, as I just said, done in various ways, and some measures have been, the recognition by peers, how others in the discipline look up to the researcher or scientist, the number of talks that they are invited to, the number of lectures that they deliver, the number of books a researcher or faculty has written, the number of classes they have taken, the number of subjects that they handle. So, these are some of the very subjective measures that I would call in assessing a researcher. And as library and information professionals, we talk about more objective measures, so bibliometrics and scientometric indicators. There is impact factor, there are citation counts, the average citations, the H index. So, all these are considered to be objective measures, but again we know there are caveats, there are limitations, and these are not really accurate measures, but have been used for a very a long period of time. Of course, H index has been around more recently, but impact factors and citation counts have been cumulative citations, average citations. These have been looked at for quite a long period of time. Now, these measures, the bibliometrics and scientometrics, traditional or conventional measures, look at citations. Most of them look at the research output, the number of papers, and then the various calculations are done. Now, citations suffer from an inherent problem, the problem of lag, as we know. It takes time for research papers to accrue or garner or gather citations. Even sometimes take years. Research papers that are called sleeping beauties, where these papers take a number of years before they actually start getting citations. So, the problem of time lag makes it very difficult for evaluating or for ranking research papers or measuring research output in in short term or in very short time windows. Now, all of us also know journals, which is the primary medium of scholarly communication, has been around for close to 350 years now, in fact more than 350 years. So, scholarly communication has been happening through research journals, and these research journals, as we know, have been primarily print based. They have been print based for I would say something like 320 years of its existence, or the research journals have been in print form. Now, since the turn of the century or a little before that, 1996, 97, and surely after 2000, the research journals have moved to the digital platform. The print journals, the traditional print journals, have become electronic journals. And today, as we know, almost all the journals that we know, the good journals, the journals that rank very high, the preferred journals of researchers and scientists and scholars, they are all available in digital form. So much so that increasingly journals are available only in many journals are available only in digital form, and over a period of time probably the print form of research journals would perhaps cease to exist. And apart from the e-journals being a medium of communication, there are other channels of scholarly communication, such as institutional repositories, such as the subject repositories like archives, and even platforms such as the Faculty of 1000 or F1000 and several other digital medium, and new channels of communication keep opening up. So, with the web being the medium of communication and social media, we talk about Twitter, Facebook, and a host of other social medium emerging as very important communication channels, the dimensions of metrics or evaluation is also undergoing a change. The traditional metrics that we have spoken about is giving way to the new metrics, or what we call the alternative metrics. So, in 2010, PhD scholar Jason Priam, he discussed about alternative metrics. Jason Priam, he highlighted the limitations of bibliometrics that we know, and he questioned about the many limitations and came up with this idea of alternative metrics of looking at digital footprints. So, when a digital footprints, what I mean here is when a research paper or a research communication is available on any of the digital platforms that we just mentioned, be it repositories, a website, a blog, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, it leaves a footprint behind. There is something left behind, and if we are able to track that and quantify that the digital footprints, we might be able to assess the impact, or if not the impact, at least the engagement that research paper or research output is making with the researchers. So, he came up with this expression Altmetrics, and since then, for about a decade now, Altmetrics has been talked about, not exactly as a replacement for the conventional metrics that we know about, but then supplementing the existing metrics with this new metric. What are the digital footprints that Altmetrics tracks? As we discussed, we revisit them. So, these can be views. Now, when journals are in digital form, the number of times that an article has been viewed, this can be tracked. And in traditional libraries, before the digital libraries came into being, in traditional libraries, handling serials was always a problem. One could easily track the usage of books, but assessing the usage of journals or serials used to be a problem, and there used to be indirect measures, scanning the desks and looking at what are the journals that have been left behind on the tables, or asking the readers or visitors or users of the library about their preference. So, there were some methods that were used to assess the usefulness of serials. But with digital or e-journals, it has become rather easy to look at objective measures. We can easily look at download statistics, the usage data of journals, the number of times the page has been viewed, the number of times it has been downloaded, the number of times an article has been tweeted, the number of mentions or the discussions that are there on Facebook and a whole lot of other social media, the reference to Wikipedia. Yeah, at one point in time, Wikipedia was not exactly considered by the scholarly community. There was some apprehensions about Wikipedia as a source of information, but we know that times have changed, and today Wikipedia is looked at as a credible source of information. So, mentions in the Wikipedia or references in Wikipedia, then the repositories, today we know the preprint repositories, subject repositories, institutional repositories are an important avenue or a channel for scholarly communication. So, these can be tracked, and then blogs by the researchers and scientists themselves, or it can be by others, by the general public even, or it can be by journalists, and even mention of research in the media, in many of the online newspapers, and then bookmarking tools such as Mendeley and many others, where the researchers bookmark the research papers. So, all these are the digital footprints that can be tracked, and the tracking itself can be done if there are unique identifiers. Now, that is very important, that unique identifiers like the digital object identifier or PubMed ID or other identifiers. So, the article published in a journal or any of the other avenues that we discussed, Wikipedia, or so all this should have identifiers which can be tracked. So, and of course, we are not leaving out citations along with all these the digital footprints that we mentioned. The citations in the traditional, in the journals, in the electronic journals are also accounted for. Now, all this is done using or done by platforms such as the popular one, the altmetric.com. So they have been there in this business of tracking the scholarly communication across the various digital media, and this is how you would know the ranking or the measure looks like. So here what we see is the Altmetric badge. So a number there you would see there 2507 for a particular article, and this 2507 what we see there is a summation is based on the places where these articles have been mentioned. As can be seen here, they can be news outlets, it can be blogs, mentioned in policy papers, tweets, Facebook pages, Wikipedia pages, and so on and so forth. So and including citations, as you would see in this particular case. So this is an Altmetric score by altmetric.com. And we see another example here of another company that is in this space, the Plum Analytics. And what we see here is the what they call the plum print. Like we had the Altmetric donut or the Altmetric badge. Here we have the plum print, where again you would see the plum print talks about the PDF views, the HTML views, the various comments, the captures, and mention on the different social media. So, and also of course at the end you would see the citations, which in both the cases that we saw were marginal given the very short span of time the paper might have been there online. The third company is Impact Story. This is yet another company in this space, alternative metrics or Altmetrics, which helps us to assess the online impact of our research, and this is what they call the impact story profile. Again, the process is the same, the different places where it is mentioned. And it is again important for me to highlight that Altmetrics is not restricted just to research papers, it goes beyond research papers. So here we are also talking about evaluation or assessment of say softwares, as you would see in this case here, the impact story profile here. We look at the softwares, we have data sets, these can also be measured. So it is not restricted only to research papers. The fourth one is the PLOS ALM. Many of us would know about PLOS, the Public Library of Science, the famous mega journal, the open access mega journal, the gold open access mega journal. So the PLOS uses its own article level metrics. ALM here stands for article level metrics, and this is a good example of a article, 2005 article, just showing you the metrics here. And what you see is this particular article has been saved about 68,000 times. It has received more than 3,000 citations, viewed that many times, 28 lakh times, and it has been shared more than 10,000 times. So this clearly gives about the impact that this particular paper has made. So we need to talk a little about the article level metrics here, because the other measures that we have been talking about, the impact factor particularly, is a journal level metric that is used or that has been used as a proxy for evaluating research output of a scientist or a research project or institution, which has got several limitations which we know, isn't it? Because the impact factor itself is based on the measure of a smaller set of papers which are cited more in a particular journal. So there would be many articles in a high impact journal that may not have been cited. So using that as a proxy has difficulties. So here we look at the article level metric, we are not looking at the journal. ALM in the case of PLOS looks at the metric at the article level, which is far more objective than looking at a journal level. So why do we need altmetrics? One reason that which I began with that scenario early on in this presentation is this can be a rather immediate measure, because as soon as an article appears on a digital platform, there is a high probability that the paper would be discussed, in contrast to the possibility of that paper getting cited, which takes a longer time. So, this can the buzz that the paper creates in a very short time window can be measured, and readers of the journal get to see the buzz around a particular article. Say journal issue has several articles, so it can see which article is being talked about more in the digital space, and the authors also get to know about the reaction that they are getting from the peers and from beyond their peers, even the general public. Maybe an article can be picked up and discussed by the media and by the larger general public, and funding agencies can get a quick assessment of the projects and research that they have funded. And most publishers today, you would see many of these have been adopted by major scientific publishers. So, you go to a publisher website, look at articles there. The most articles would have an altmetric measure. So, publishers are looking into this, and also citation databases. A database like Scopus, for example, includes altmetric measure as well. There are limitations, there are issues with altmetrics as well, like there are with all the other conventional or traditional measures, because altmetrics can also be gamed. The numbers can be gamed, they can be manipulated, and of course this can hold true even for citations, as we know. But then with the digital footprints, with mentions, retweets, this is far more easier to do. And then the use of social media itself, not the larger scientific community or academic community does not use or do not use social media, and this is more true for the Indian context. We do use social media phenomenally, I would say. All of us are hooked on to the social media, but when it comes to discussing research, sharing research, communicating research, that still is not happening in a big way in the scholarly and scientific community. So, therefore, if it's not discussed, shared, then obviously the scores are going to remain going to be non-existent, or they would remain negligible. Sometimes the buzz can be misleading. An article might create a lot of buzz, but that might be for the wrong reasons, which is again true for citations as well. There can be negative citations that papers tend to receive. So, these issues do remain for altmetrics as well. So, altmetrics is a measure, has been there for quite some time now, for about close to a decade, and as I did mention, we are looking at this measure seriously. But then to sum up, this is clearly a non-traditional measure. It has not been there for a very long time, and the focus is more on article level metrics, and as I did mention, it goes beyond the articles. Now, here I would say it goes beyond articles in two senses. One, as I mentioned previously, it goes beyond articles in the sense of looking at other types of outputs, such as softwares, data sets, and so on and so forth. And people extract, not looking at the whole article, but extract a figure from the article, or just extract a table from the article and then discuss that. So, that also is important, the tracking the footprints of small segments of a research article than the entire article itself is also important. And we know open access and open science is generating lots of interest across the world. They are getting immensely popular, and consequently other channels of scholarly communications other than research journals, the ones that we spoke about, the platforms such as faculty of 1000 and repositories, the preprints and other repositories. So these would continue to grow, which means that Altmetrics would be continue to be important. And it also offers, Altmetrics also offers an understanding of how research is being used or discussed by the broader community, and increasingly with open access and open science. There is a lot of discussion on how the money spent on research reaching the public and the stake of the public in such big public funded research. So Altmetrics is again a way of understanding how the broader community is looking at the research output. And lastly, Altmetrics, it supplements the existing traditional metrics without supplanting them. So it's not a replacement, but basically an add-on, basically a layer on top of the existing metrics that we know. So friends, with that I conclude this discussion on exploring Altmetrics. I hope that this has been useful to you, and as I understand, there is a discussion forum on the ARPIT Library and Information Science portal. So if you have questions, please do post your questions and have a discussion on the topic. There are lots of material that are available out there and many studies based on Altmetrics. So you may want to look up that. So thank you all so very much, and I wish to also thank the coordinator of this ARPIT Library and Information Science program, librarian of the Central Library at the Indian Institute of Technology, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so very much.